Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to All Things Policy. My name is Bharath Reddy, and I have with me my colleague Rijesh Panicker. The AI agents have kind of arrived with Anthropic, the company behind Claude, just launching their public beta access to computer use. And we thought we'll try to talk about what they're about and understand things a little better in that process. So what Anthropic has done is that they say that developers can direct Claude to use computers the way people do. That is by looking at a screen, moving a cursor, clicking buttons, typing text, and so on. And they say that there are a lot of applications that are already in the process of exploring the possibilities of these agents. Applications like Canva, Asana, Cognition, DoorDash, Browser Company, and all of these different kind of applications are trying to integrate these capabilities onto their platforms. So this is still something that's experimental, and we thought we'll first try to understand what agents are and what they're capable of doing, and then see what might be the policy implications of these kind of technologies. So to start off with, you can think of agents as something that can perform a wide range of tasks. And a recent CSET report says that you can classify agentic behavior on four characteristics: that they perform complex goals in more complex environments, exhibiting independent planning and adaptation to directly take action in virtual or real environments. So the four characteristics are complex goals, complex environment, independent planning and adaptation, and direct action. So when you look at these four characteristics, Rajesh, what do you think comes to your mind in terms of what are agents? Maybe take some examples that you can think of to make this a little clearer.
Yeah, sure. So, if you just look at those three things that you mentioned, right? Complex goals, complex environments, the ability to take independent action and to react or judge and autonomously make decisions. I would say that even things like a self-driving car, like Tesla's fully safe driving or FSD, whatever that is, and or Waymo, they are also effectively AI agents because they do operate in complex environments. They are autonomous, they do take independent action, and they are reacting and judging and making changes accordingly. Something like an Alexa could also be thought of as an AI agent. You ask it to play a song, it figures out where it is in the database, it plays it for you, right? It is an independent actor, which is goal based. So from that perspective, I think the difference between that and what Anthropic has launched with Claude is the fact that this is kind of open ended. Computer use essentially is still an API based access. It's not going to be part of its browser interface, I guess. So, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to tell Claude Sonnet that, hey, I have this spreadsheet here, just open it up, pick the data from that, and then use that to say fill a form. Right? That's an example they've given in their blog. And then the underlying computer use API will figure out, okay, where is this spreadsheet on your computer screen? It'll click on it, open it up, copy the data, put it into say another form and submit it, which is very open-ended. If I can tell it to do that, I can tell it to do 100 other things, right? Send an email on my behalf, right? Click on it, go to Gmail, log in. I'm verbally telling you something, go create an email, type it out, and along the way maybe improve the quality of the text and then send it out is something I could do. So that is the major difference between this and agents that already exist in our world that we might think of as autonomous agents or AI agents.
So I think I can take one more example, which I think OpenAI demonstrated during a recent event. So what they did is that they had a live demo where they wanted to demonstrate the capabilities of these agents. So they asked ChatGPT to make a call to close by sellers of strawberries and order a bunch of strawberries to that event where they were at. Right? So it was able to take these instructions, shortlist a few vendors who were close by, select a particular product, place an order, and say that it would pay cash on delivery, right? So you can think of these sequence of tasks being performed by an agent, and all it needs is just a general instructions, and it can take and interact with these complex environments to be able to do that. And you can think of even more maybe complex agents in
No, but
that.
even before we go there, just if you
Hmm,
think about what you said, imagine how complex it is, right? And unlike a
hmm,
self-driving car, which is, very specifically trained for the domain of autonomous driving, it's been trained for months on end. You keep retrieving information, you have image information, all kinds of things. So it's very specialized. It has X number of things that it knows how to break down and X decisions it knows how to make, right? That self-driving system for the car cannot run your toaster or your blender just because you ask it to. It won't. It needs further training for that. But in this, it's an LLM, it's a generalized training model, and you say order strawberries for me, and it can figure out that to order strawberries I need to call someone, I need to figure out the price, I need to figure out the volume. It can do all of that. It can actually break it down. Tomorrow, if you tell it to order mangoes, it'll work. If you tell it to, send a mail, it'll work. So it's much more general in that sense. And that is what is very interesting about it, right? It's a very general AI agent that could work on your behalf.
right. And even on these four different categories, if we try to analyze it, so this probably still ranks pretty low on complexity, the complex environment. And it shows a little bit of complex behavior, complex goals, and planning and adaptation and all that. But you can think of far more complicated things that these agents could take up once they're sufficiently advanced. Right? So one example you can think of an extreme example is Nick Bostrom had this idea of a paperclip company which is run by an AI CEO, and the AI's goal is just to maximize the production of paperclips, and so it goes all out, dedicates all resources towards this one single goal, sees humans as a threat because they might one day turn it off when it gets too aggressive in its listing. So it takes a sequence of actions and goes in a certain direction. So maybe that is very highly agentic on all of these four different criteria, but and that seems to be a very long way off and not what any of these systems are capable of at the moment. But there's a gradient of capabilities, and you can think of these characteristics as a way to measure them. Okay? So and a lot of the applications that you can think of right now are maybe simple things like booking a flight, ordering something on an app, maybe converting voice commands to something, or things like that.
I think that's a good point you made around, the paperclip problem and comparing that to these agents. I don't fully agree that, yes, the way it's been released, it is very likely that these agents are safer because I'm sure they would have built in a lot of guardrails and tested it. But imagine if the guardrails are not there or they're not working properly. You could ask an AI agent to send a mail to someone and it could just get stuck in a loop and spam that person with, hundreds of thousands of mails because it just got stuck in some loop, right? So it is possible
Yeah.
with any AI agent that is autonomous that it can get caught in a loop, but with that is what guardrails are for and the testing is for. And Anthropic at least has signed up with both the UK and US AI safety institutes, I think. So
Mm.
presumably it's well tested and they'll continue testing it and work on feedback. So those will be needed. But yeah, I do see your point. I mean, this I think the really interesting thing with this is it's kind of a step function change from very domain specific agents to something that is general, which they've actually launched. I'm a little surprised Anthropic is the one that came out of the door first with it. I would have thought OpenAI would earlier, but Anthropic has kind of beaten them given their focus on AI safety and responsibility. I am a little surprised they came out with it beforehand. You know,
So since you mentioned guardrails and what can go wrong, right? So Anthropic has releases as a public beta. It's not a
yeah, yeah.
fully tested. I think they say it's an experimental product. There are risks involved, and the risks are distinct and unique from the standard risks that were associated with chatbots or with other API features that they had. So these are different kinds of risks. They acknowledge that, and they recommend that you need to take certain precautions, like having a dedicated virtual machine or a container with minimum privileges, don't give it access to sensitive data, limit internet access, keep a human in the loop, and so on. Right. So for any kind of sensitive decisions, the human should be the final approver of that decision. So you see that there is some acknowledgement, some guardrails which have been built in, but to understand how these guardrails work and how they could think, how do you think such a system would be built? So you have the model. How do you think that is made to interact with and take these kind of complex
Okay, so I mean,
decisions?
let's do the more specific example of what they've done with Claude, right? So,
Mm,
the computer use system basically what it is doing is if you, like I was saying, the earlier example I used, if you tell the LLM that I want you to open the spreadsheet, copy the data from it, put it into and submit a form. Let's say it's a very simple request, right? And I think the underlying system, what it does is it has the ability to access your screen as it is, as you are seeing it at that point of time. And then based on that, it figures out where this so-called spreadsheet is. Or let's say you give it a more specific thing that, okay, there's a folder named data, and within that there's a spreadsheet. Then it can figure out where on the screen that folder is. It can figure out how many pixels it needs to move to get to that, and click on it, go inside, open the spreadsheet, copy that data, put it, submit the form. So there are so many steps to be done. I mean, when we say it, it sounds very simple.
Hmm.
For a human to do it, also, it's very simple. But for that system to do it, it has to actually figure out how many pixels should the cursor move. How do you do a double click? How do I send a message for a double click? Double click on that sheet, open it up. What is the top right row? Where on the screen is the top right row? Where? How do I get the mouse there? Then how do I? There are so many sub routines that needs to be done.
Hmm.
That seems to be done by this underlying computer use API. Now, is that a set of rules or is that another AI agent? I don't know. I mean, I haven't read the paper yet, but it would be cool if that also were another AI agent. And then
Hmm.
it's like an AI speaking to another AI, which is another very interesting use case once you have all these kind of agents, right?
Hmm.
Tomorrow, I mean, I'm just diverging a little bit, but it just occurred to me that tomorrow, if Microsoft Office starts to embed all kinds of AI agents within their Office things, maybe what happens is you tell Claude that I want you to copy the spreadsheet, and it actually talks to your Microsoft Office AI and says, hey, can you give me this data from that spreadsheet? And the spreadsheet never gets opened, for example. Right? It just sends the data. Let's not worry about how it's sending the data, and let's assume it's not going somewhere else. But that could happen. So you could have a situation where if agents
Agents are talking to
become
each
very
other.
exactly, agents are talking to agents in ways that you don't need to understand. It need not actually be that your agent is telling the other agent in English. It could be some random binary language that you have no clue what it is, but the job gets done, which
Right.
becomes a little more magical. That's how AI works in many ways, right? When you type a prompt on an LLM, what you get back, you don't know where it's coming from. It's just being generated, and it's sort of magical. It could go that way. This use case is not like that. Hopefully, you should actually be able to see your cursor moving and something being clicked and something being opened. But it'll be very interesting to think about how that might change in the future.
Right. For a moment, I was thinking we're in some scene, we're discussing some scene from The Matrix where one
Yeah,
agent
I
is talking
mean,
to another agent and they're negotiating certain things, right? So, yeah.
yeah.
So, moving on, when we think of agents being able to do all of these things, what do you think are some of the opportunities and risks that come with it? At least with the current capabilities that we're talking about, what are some of the opportunities that you can think of? And then we'll come to risks and maybe how do you govern them, things like that.
So, I mean, like, actually, in fact, again, if you look at the Claude blog, right, they already talk about things like Canva and Replit, and those businesses are already trying to figure out ways to embed these kind of agents within their workflow. So those are all I mean, I think coding is one very interesting use case where this kind of an agent might help. Like, you code something that has a front end, and instead of you sitting and clicking on every button and testing it, or you sending it to some other automation tool, you just tell the AI that here is this UI, uh,
Mhm.
and I have a spreadsheet that tells you what are the various clicks that are possible and what outcomes I expect. Go and click everything, see what outcomes you're getting. Like, for example, it has to return a number, or it has to return a link or something, or it has to show up a form, whatever it is. Compare that to what I put in my Excel sheet as to what I expect to be the outcome. And where the outcome is not right, go look at the code and tell me what do you think the changes are to the code. I could say all of this to an AI agent, and presumably it'll do all of that. So that's a whole lot of testing and all of that. And meanwhile, I can continue coding my next set of features. So that's a huge productivity jump, right? And to do all of this, you would need to write your own use cases and test cases. Somebody else will be doing the testing for you. There'll be a front end tester who's clicking and doing all of it. All kinds of asynchronous things are happening. Meanwhile, this AI agent could do all of that for you while you're working on the code, right? You could almost think of a case where an AI agent is looking at you typing in your code for a front end, and as you're typing in the code, it's figuring out what kind of a UI you need to make it work and building an UI in the backend. Just an example. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
think that any of these can do it today, but that would be cool. So I don't even worry about what the front end looks like. You just type your
Right.
code. I mean, I guess you don't even need to type code these days. You just tell it what code you need. It'll do the code. It'll give you the front end, and it'll also do the testing. Something like that. So those
You
kind of
see,
use cases are very, very interesting, I think. Right.
and these are a lot of you know things that humans are not good at, like very boring things, doing things repeatedly, and automating it can lead to a lot of efficiency gains. It
Absolutely.
can lead to a lot of productivity and so on. Right? So And like when we were also looking at, so you have these models, which are the base layer on which the agents are built and all that. And a lot of these applications are using these to do specific tasks and build on top of them. So when we had worked on our AI paper a while back, so we had also thought about how these models will become like there are a few big capable models, and then a lot of different applications will use these things. So it takes a lot of skill, talent, to build these models, and you'll have a few companies that are dominating and at the frontier in terms of capabilities. But applications, you can have a lot of different companies trying to build them, and that's where we thought Indian companies will be able to have an advantage because they have the engineering talent. They can customize it for different kinds of use cases, because Indian use cases, you might have a lot of other things that might not really be addressed anywhere else, right? So those kind of things. So those are some opportunities which are again there for Indian companies to build on top of. But when you also look at some of the risks, what are some of the things that come to your mind? If you can.
See, I mean, again, the I would argue that at least based on what they're saying, it looks like they've covered most of the bases, right? I mean, the real risk here is that you have an AI agent with an API that is now able to directly access potentially everything on your computer, right?
Hmm,
So when they say it, the question to ask is, are those guardrails really strong enough to make sure that no sensitive data is shared? Who determines what is sensitive data, right? I might decide something is not sensitive data, and for you it might be sensitive data. So those kind of issues are there, and then the question is, where does that data, like, if as long as if all of the agents are within the umbrella of one organization, let's say that, Anthropic had said, look, I have the LLM that is your front end, but I have also built AI agents that are synced up with multiple services. I built a travel agent AI agent, and I built some logistics AI agent and a car calling AI agent, but they're all Anthropic fine-tuned AI models. Then you're only conversing within your ecosystem. And you might arguably say that I've got guardrails that make sure no data is sent, not sent, sensitive data is not shared, etc. But you have something like this where there's an AI agent that then uses your computer based on your commands and interacts with the world. I mean, right now it doesn't have access to social media and it doesn't have access to government websites. I think those are the two big broad rails they talked about. But it can access any website, any mail. How do you stop a Nigerian scam mail going out to 1,000 people, right? It's not a social media thing. It's via email, right? How do you stop it from happening, right? So those kind of, like, I'm sure people will try to jailbreak it, or not jailbreak it exactly, but use it in ways it's not been conceived of yet, and that will be interesting to see how it copes. Which is why they're being careful about it. They've, I think, released it to their early partners first. Now it's still in beta use. You see what kind of use cases are coming up. Those kind of risks might exist, obviously, right? How do you know that the file you're asking it to open is not malware that you previously downloaded? That's possible,
hmm, hmm,
right? So then what happens? So you suppose you say send this Excel sheet to somebody, and that Excel sheet actually had a malware in it, or a PDF file with a malware in it, and you haven't checked. AI agent is not going to do the checking, right? It's just going to say, if you say send it to someone, it'll send it to someone. So that brings that question that we were discussing earlier about who has the liability in a case like this, right? If an AI agent is acting on your behalf, then where does the liability lie, basically, right?
right. I think largely a lot of the risks of these kind of applications are also risks that are generally associated with software, right? So cybersecurity risks, or data governance related things. So those are the broadly the different kinds of harms that you can see. Other than that, you'll also see bias, and these things are built for a certain context, trained on certain kinds of data. You try to use it on something that it was not trained on, it will not perform as well. So you'll have all of these kind of things. Now, in addition to this, you
No,
since
but
you
there is one subtle difference there, which is that I think, see, when I click on a file and I send a mail, people are quite willing to assume the responsibility of making sure that, I could still send out a malware, but it is my response. I'll agree that. But if I'm just telling an AI agent to send something, it's quite easy for people to say, oh, I just, I assume that the AI agent will check to see if it's a malware. It's quite easy for
Mhm.
people to say that. Right? So
Right,
the expectations will change. You assume that
right,
because it's smart enough to send it on my behalf, it's also smart enough to make these checks, even though that is implicit, not explicitly stated.
right.
So
I wouldn't probably open an email from a stranger, but if something Rijesh is sending, I'll probably click on it, right?
yeah.
So yeah. And I thought of something else that you were about. when you were saying that Anthropic has built these specific agents for different kinds of tasks, and they're interacting with and doing all of these different things within that ecosystem. And I think that's how it will be used in some sense. So you have the LLM, and then you'll have a lot of agents built on top of that, or to do certain things, and these applications will then be interfacing with them. So you'll see that there's still market power at the model or the at the agent level, which is still consolidated, but you'll have a lot of applications which are then using this as for doing different kinds of things. So don't you think that there'll be some?
No, not necessarily. Like I'll just, again, just an example off the top of my head, right? Let's say tomorrow that this feature is available as an app on your mobile phone, right? So you type into your, I mean, this is kind of a silly example because you could directly do it on Amazon, but let's say you told your AI agent, Claude AI agent, that, oh, I want you to search for the best some product and buy it for me on Amazon. It could go to the Amazon app, click, type it into the search box, filter it by some criteria and buy it for you. Or it could go into the Amazon app and talk to the Rufus assistant on Amazon saying what is the best priced item. And then the Rufus assistant will do the job of figuring all that out and say, okay, this is it, and it will buy it for you. They're two different things, right?
Mhm.
One is the old school way of actually going and typing in the search box and doing it. The other is one AI agent has spoken to another AI agent, one of which is a niche domain specific Amazon sales agent called Rufus, and your agent has just spoken to that agent. That agent has done the rest of the work of figuring out what is the right product and suggesting, and this agent is then purchased on your behalf. They're both possible, I mean, and it doesn't need anything. It only needs your AI agent or the Claude AI agent to understand that there is another AI agent on the other side that can do the work for it. That's literally the only thing you need. You could stop that from happening. You could say no, it should not happen, but I don't see why
Mhm.
it should not happen.
Right. Anyway, so we looked at some of the opportunities and risks that are there, and coming to what you think might be governance implications of these risks that we've seen. So, and the CSET paper that we talked about earlier, they broadly mentioned three different kinds of governance implications. So, one is broadly just to understand the technology, where it is heading, how do you track its progress, how do you define methodologies to assess these technologies, and so on. So that's understanding the technology itself. Secondly, they talk about technical guardrails, which we have also touched upon, that there are these specific risks involved, and how do you ensure that these agents prioritize security, privacy, trustworthiness, control, and all of these different things that are important to users. And lastly, they talk about how legal guardrails are necessary. A lot of the existing laws might have to be contextualized, considering that these agents might take actions on behalf of someone. So, who do you hold accountable? How do you define legal personhood, consciousness, negligence? Principal agent relationships. All of these need to be relooked at. So, I think broadly this gives you a sense of the areas where there are concerns. Any thoughts on this, and any concluding thoughts on what we've been talking about and what you
Yeah, I mean, so I
foresee?
mean, like those three certainly look like reasonable things to worry about. I think purely technically, I would be interested to see, if, let's say, agents become more common and more people and more software starts to interact through agents. You need some kind of I don't know, a sort of a spec, a specification by each agent saying, look, these are the things I can do. This is the kind of information I need, and this is the kind of information of yours that I'll be taking and storing, so that when an agent on your behalf is talking to some other software or agent, it knows exactly what information is needed. Right? So that is one way to ensure that not too much information is given out. So I think the privacy aspect of it, right? You have an AI that is now able to see everything on your screen. That has obvious implications for privacy and your data and the sensitivity of your data access and all of that. So, and then when it is sending data on your behalf to someone, if there is some automated mechanism to figure out what is the set of data that is being asked by each agent you're interacting with. Let's say there is a human in the loop, and the human has the ability to see, okay, this is the data that actually goes out when I ask you to do X. I think that will be a nice sort of like
Yeah.
a monitoring system which allows the human to understand what's happening, right? So today, you ask you to book a ticket, it will go book a ticket on your behalf. But if along with that, you also got to know, okay, this is the kind of information that goes out, your address, Maybe for some reason it sends your geolocation, then your credit card details have to go out. If you're able to know that, okay, this is the kind of information that's going out and it's being used by these agents or these sub agents for this purpose, that gives a level of transparency and comfort to people that, okay, this is how it's being used and my data is not being used in ways I don't know about. Right. So that's the only other thing I can think of. But that's not really a legal thing. That's something I assume models and model builders will figure out, or application builders will figure out as we go along.
Any concluding thoughts? What do you think? How do you think this is going to play out in a couple of years?
Uh, well, I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. It's very clear that a lot of firms are very interested in it. They can find use cases for it, so that we should expect more of that to come. I don't know where it'll go. I don't know. It all depends on whether people enjoy it, like it, use it. I assume they will, because it certainly seems like it'll be a lot more convenient. It'll be interesting to see where AI agents end up, and in what kind of spaces and domains we see agents. Clearly, in some areas, you want to be careful. You don't want AI agents autonomously doing your financial transactions for you, because the cost can be very high of a mistake. But in some domains, maybe it's a good thing to have. It'll definitely increase our efficiency, productivity. So I'm just curious to see where it goes. So it is kind of interesting.
Right. Since you've started using LLM, people have been very impressed with it, but a lot of practical applications were limited in the sense that you couldn't trust the output in different kind in situations. But this opens a different kind of application of these technologies, and it'll be interesting to see what all you can do with it. And it'll have a lot more practical implications than was possible so far. So that'll be interesting. And I was thinking that AI agents have arrived could be the title of this podcast, but like you were saying, I think they have not arrived. They've always been here in some sense, and it's just that they've become more generalized and are capable of a lot of other things, not just limited to specific narrow tasks. So,
And maybe it should
uh,
be AI agents have arrived again.
right. So, thanks, Rijesh, for joining us, and thank you, everyone. So, if you have any thoughts about what we've discussed, do write into us and let us know what you think. Have a nice day.
Thanks. Bye.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.